Good morning and welcome back to our show. This is our first segment and we are joined by Arthur Saldivar, who's the attorney for the Belize Peace Movement, a redistricting case, as well as Mr. Bobby Lopez, who's a claimant on the matter. Good morning to both of you, gentlemen.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning. Thanks for having us.
Thank you for joining us on set this morning. So where do we begin with this conversation? Because there's so much to talk about, but I'll give Mr. Saldivar the floor to set the stage for us. Let's start at the recent events. The matter was brought back to the court. What was your objective, or what did you seek to attain from the court in bringing the matter back?
Well, allow me to start by saying this first. Apart from the 1st of September 1981, today is a seminal day in Belize's political history, because for the first time since that day, we have a chance for democracy to actually come into being.
Why do you say that?
I say that because, and to answer your question, what we hoped to achieve by going to court last week was what we are going to be having this morning in the House of Representatives, where there'll be a tabling of a proposal, and that proposal coming from the Election and Boundaries Commission is to divide the nation in terms of its electoral divisions as nearly equal as possible. Now, mind you, the proposal that's being laid is a duck. It will not achieve it. It's a dud. They wasted the people's money and they've wasted the people's time. But at least we've got them to do what they were supposed to do in putting it forward. Now we are anticipating the parliamentarians completing the job of rubbishing it and sending it back to where it came from.
I've always wondered why is it such a difficult task, or why is it so hard to accept that redistricting should take place, or boundaries, constituency boundaries should be adjusted from time to time for the sake of having equality or some sort of equity in the power of an individual's vote? It seems to be common sense, but what's the challenge here?
The challenge is that we have many politicians but no leaders. And the politicians operate in their own interest and not in the interest of the people. Leaders, however, have a responsibility, and they accept that responsibility with maturity. George Price was a leader. Philip Golson was a leader. We don't have many leaders right now, and that is the problem.
I want to take the conversation over to Mr. Lopez and ask you your involvement in this process. What has it been like so far?
Good morning, everyone, and I must compliment you all on a very beautiful setting.
Yes,
Thank you.
yes. Welcome to Hawaii
You know,
Escapes.
it's nostalgic. You go back in time,
Yes.
and then it actually realizes how much this country it's the value of it, and why we are here exactly.
Yeah.
So, as a claimant, I have to give a quick little history. I've run several times in elections. So in doing that, we recognize the deficiencies and how the odds are really stacked against certain areas. And for example, in Belmopan, I happen to live or have lived in the 3 largest constituencies because of my business: Belmopan, Belize Rural South, San Pedro, and Placencia, which is Tancred West. I'm still registered in Placencia because that's where I was living the last election. It's the largest constituency with close to 11,000 voters. So in 2012, when we observed and we read what the Organization of American States had to say in their report, their final report to the government, and that is presented to all the OAS, so all these people see it. It said that there is a serious problem here with the equality of votes, and it violates your constitution, and you need to fix this before the next general election.
That's in
2012. The government was advised to fix this before you have another general election.
We've had how many since
We've had
then?
three.
Three.
So
Correct.
2012, 2015, 2020. We're going to have the fourth now, upcoming in the next,
2025.
whenever the Prime Minister deems it fit. And so 2015 was a 3-year snap election, and nothing was done to fix this unconstitutional problem. And so in 2015, we made an attempt, we as in a group of us claimants, but it was so close to the election that we couldn't get it into the, we made an attempt to get it into the court and everything, it didn't fly. So we had it on our back burner to make sure we do this before the next election. And so in 2018, we started putting our case together. We approached, may I say, several attorneys. Many of them turned us down. Many never even answered us. And so on this note, I want to say thanks and big respect to Arthur, who willingly stepped up to that plate when we approached him.
Do you think they feared some sort of political
Yes. In
repercussions?
fact, one particular attorney that responded said it was too politically. I'm not remembering the phrase they used, but yes, it is. You know, sad to say, a lot of these politicians are aligned with one party or the other, and depending on where you are at the moment, they don't want to touch an issue like this. So when Arthur agreed to, in 2018, we put the case together and we lodged it in 2019. So we were over a year before the next general election was called. We were in court, and may I say, on the very first day in court, us and the claimants and Arthur and Miss Michelle Trapp, his assistant, the government tried to dismiss it. In fact, the attorneys asked Judge Benjamin, this case is premature, the elections and boundaries will do their job, we think it's, you know, and Judge Benjamin gave them a verbal thrashing. And it was a stiff scolding, and he said, no, I'm going to listen to this case. This case has merit, and we're going to hear this case.
In 2018
That was 2019.
under
That was
2019 under a
2019
UDP
under the
administration.
UDP administration. First hearing was Judge Benjamin. Fast forward, we're back and forth in court. We see the workings of an election looming. We went into COVID in 2020. We're still in court, and election is called. In our application was an injunction in the event that such a thing happened. So then our attorney applied the injunction. Wow. Both parties brought their high-level attorneys against ordinary citizens, just asking to have them do the right thing.
It's interesting.
And both of them had the same argument to the judge, which is now a different judge, Justice Arana, and convinced her that they had spent millions already in the campaign.
And so you
we can't allow this little group to stop this process. And one of the attorneys even said, why did you wait so long to put your injunction? Well, the problem is you can't put an injunction until the election is called, and the election is called and it gives you 30 days to the election date. We had no choice. So now, okay, so fast forward then, we were overruled in that particular thing. Election took place, but the election took place under the promise by both parties, whoever wins, we will redistrict.
In a year.
Within a year. Well, within less than a year of the new administration, we get notice to strike out. The new administration has filed to strike our case out. Here we go back to court again to fight a strikeout case now under a different judge, Judge Chabot. Luckily, and I must say thankfully, she ruled in our favor. She said, you guys, this redistricting will take place. You all need to come up with a consent order together. And it was decided that by July the 17th, no later, on or before, the redistricting proposal will be tabled in the in the Parliament. And by the 30th of July of that same month, it should have been a bill to be debated. In other words, we're 10 months late. That was part of the consent order, that by the 30th, it should have been a bill. 10 months is passing, nothing is happening. We're in limbo. So at the end of this year, we sent out a press release and asked the commission to kindly resign, because what they had put forward, which we were entitled to receive, it was only the claimants with our attorneys and parliamentarians had a first look at that. And if it was possible to play what you all covered in the interview, that's the eye-opener of why we're here today. The Honorable Cordell Hyde, the Honorable Julius Espat, it's about a minute or so, they encapsulate their first reaction of discontent, serious concerns. It's got to have a do-over. It will not fly with international norms. It will not stand the scrutiny of the court. All of those things were said in a minute or two. And I really think your audience would do a lot if we could play that, because that is what sets
We're
the tone.
gathering that.
So I
We're
believe we
gathering
have
that.
those clips ready, and we're going to play those.
We do have major concerns. You know, we had a major concern with I believe it's the deviation rate, I think. I don't know, I can't recall the exact term. It's the deviation rate that that proposal is looking at 25%, when globally, across the world, the acceptable rate, the accepted rate is somewhere closer to 15%. So that immediately sent off alarm bells. We also want to be in compliance with the Constitution that says that each constituency, each division is supposed to have as close a number as possible, equal number as possible in terms of electors. That's what we want. And what we saw on Tuesday did not pass that smell test, you know. So ultimately, this thing will be tabled in the National Assembly, but I would want to think that this thing will, Commission will end up having to have a do-over. But that's where we are. That's our initial reaction to it. We just didn't like what we saw.
My concern is equitable distribution. If we are going to do this exercise, you have to follow international norms that determines what your range is, and you can't play with it. Why am I saying this? Because it might hurt some of us, that we might not like it, but at the end of the day, it has to pass legal scrutiny. And so at the meeting, I asked one question to one of the attorneys: can this document pass legal scrutiny? And he said it won't last 10 minutes. And therefore, that was enough for me. And then I asked another question: what was the level of flexibility given in the numbers? International norms are telling us that we should be plus or minus 15% from the number, meaning the equal number per. This proposal was over 25%. And so I immediately did not have any problem voicing my discontent with it. We can't fool ourselves, man. We can't put on a document that will not pass scrutiny. And if we are doing that, then it's irresponsible. And so that basically is, and not only myself, many others, that is in essence why we put out a statement stating that it, we have, when I say we have serious concerns. So they say it nicer than me.
But sir, does it then go back to the commission, or it has to be tabled as is?
No, it has to be tabled, and it has to be debated in the House, and Parliament will decide whether they accept it or not.
All right, well, thank you for playing that video footage there. Mr. Lopez, I want you to go back to what you were mentioning before this was aired and explain to us why this is an important piece of reaction for our viewers to understand.
These two gentlemen have earned the title honorable in my books. What they said is honorable because their immediate view of the proposal that they received was one that they realized would not meet the scrutiny of the court, is far from what the Constitution is asking, and anything that comes before the House has got to meet those two things. But there was a third thing he said: international norms. And I've been getting the question a lot from people who say, well, why international norms? Well, we've signed on to, as signatories and as members of the UN, the OAS and CARICOM, they all have democratic charters. And I'll read for the benefit of the thing. One of the things that the Democratic Charter says, very important. Number 6, every voter is entitled to exercise his or her right equally with others and to have his or her vote accorded equivalent weight to that of others. And so under that very principle is where our Constitution came up with every constituency shall be nearly as equal in number of voters as the other. We cannot have 1,876 voters in Fort George in 2020 and over 10,000 in Stan Creek West. For example, just in this budget, $6 million was allocated to all 31 constituencies. So every area rep divided by 31 gets $193,000 for the year. For the year. Divided by 1,876, the voter in Fort George is getting over $105 or so in resources, scholarships, and education, whatever it is. Per year, 17. So that's a little over $1.50 per month.
Yeah.
Imagine, in Stan Creek West, that voter is getting $17. So Belize is getting
Far less.
Yes, far less.
Far
$105 and $17. So they're getting about $15, $20 a month, and Stan Creek West is getting $1.50.
And this is why we should care about this as
We
viewers.
must care. We must care.
I want to get Mr. Saldivar in the conversation though, because you were painting an interesting analogy to me while that video was playing. And I want us to use that as an opportunity to break down the redistricting exercise even further as why it is important.
Right. There's always this emphasis on what people get through representation, but not so much as to what they lose or potentially lose. When we look at the situation involving representation, for example, in Belize City, we have 10 representatives for a small geographic area. Consider it a yard. In your yard, you plant your trees produce fruits, you want to protect it, you want to keep it safe. So you may put some dogs in your yard to help keep your yard safe while you're not there. Then consider Stan Creek District as a yard. Now Belize City is very small, it has 10, we'll say they have 10 dogs in that yard. Stan Creek, which is bigger than Belize City in size, the district, only has 2 dogs. And those 2 dogs, they are mutts, patlikas, right? The ones in Belize City might be like, we classify them like pit bulls, they are stronger,
Right.
Yeah.
right? Now those mutts, because of that big yard, they can't patrol it, they can't really keep it safe, they cannot ensure that the resources that are produced in that yard is maintained for the people who live in the yard.
Right.
Now the ones in Belize City, they don't give a damn about the people, sorry to say, because in their yard, their people are very deprived, very poor, but they are fat. So this is one of the problems. We have right now, and I've said this before on other places, but I'll say it here again. There are 2 main issues, and you guys were talking about carrots earlier before we came on, and the farming community in the rural parts of the country. 2 major issues affecting us. The wildfires that are raging in the south, in the west, and even in the Belize district. And as a result of the drought, the rolling blackouts coming as a result of Chaleo and Moyahon not having the water supply to have the hydroelectric dam give us the output that it should.
Right.
When we are talking about redistricting and increasing representation in the rural areas, we're talking about putting more people around the table to fight for the issues impacting those communities. One of those issues, because for example in Stan Creek District you have a lot of tourism operations, and these tourism operations have solar power now. They've all invested in solar energy, and they're producing more than they can actually consume. But there is no incentive program to sell the electricity they produce to the national grid, which is one of the ways through which we could actually alleviate our dependence on Mexico, who is now not wanting to sell us because they themselves have an increase in demand. More representation means more opportunities for the people in your district, more opportunities for them to make more for themselves. I don't advocate the whole community vote and using the 6 million and going to a representative because you want to get a handout. The people in the Stann Creek district are proud. They want to do for themselves, but they don't have enough voices around the table to demand the resources that they need to have for themselves, which they themselves produce.
Do you believe that the thought of losing a portion of your constituency or your constituency altogether and your position in the House of Representatives influences the position of politicians on this matter?
No, it is their myopic understanding. And as Bob Marley says, only a fool leans upon his own misunderstanding. Here it is. There is no need to lose any constituency in Belize City because the borders can be expanded. You start with those constituencies that are on the periphery of the city, for example, Port Layola and Freetown. You can move Port Layola and its boundary into Mile 8 to take in people in Mile 8, while you will move Collet Division into parts of Port Layola, you will move Queen Square into parts of Collet, and so on and so forth, to increase the numbers in those divisions. Then you'll move Freetown into Ladyville, and take portions of Ladyville into Freetown, which will increase its numbers to make it as nearly equal as possible as the others across the country, because that is the goal. And you will move Pickstock into Lake Eye and into Freetown, and you move Caribbean Shores, and you move all these boundaries to include more people.
I can see that you've given this a lot of thought.
Of course, nobody needs to lose any constituency. All that needs to happen is that in the city, the constituencies need to become larger. So you move the boundaries out. And in the rural areas, the constituency becomes smaller. So you create new divisions in the rural areas. Kaya district needs to have at least 7 representatives. Stann Creek district needs to at least have 4 representatives. Toledo needs to have at least 3 representatives. Okay? There is 1 more representative for the Belize district, which should come from Belize Rural South. Because you should be able to split Belize Rural South with South Ambergris and Kikaka being a division and North Ambergris being its own division, because they have enough numbers.
Yes, that's true.
So let's talk a bit about what the significance of today's event inside the House and how this moves this whole initiative forward, if any at all, heading into the 2025 elections.
Today's events is a confirmation of Parliament's understanding that the present schedule, 1 of the ROPA, is unconstitutional. You don't go into this exercise if you have a constitutional schedule to run elections on. So you cannot approbate, which is to approve something, and reprobate, which is disapprove at the same time. So you either do it and you acknowledge that this is a problem, or you don't do it and say it's not a problem. But you're doing it.
You're doing it.
So you're telling the world, this is a problem, which they have done before the consent order.
Yeah.
But today we'll really find out what the stance is.
Yes, today we'll find out who knows what a democracy means.
I think the Prime Minister encapsulates it exactly what's going to happen today. In his reaction 10 months ago, he said, what is important, and I've mentioned it to the minister responsible for the Elections and Boundaries Commission, which is Minister Henry Charles Usher, that it is important that whatever comes to the House, which is happening today, that it can withstand the scrutiny of the court. So here the Prime Minister, in his wisdom, understands that the court is the guardian of the Constitution. We're a constitutional democracy. We're not a parliamentary democracy. Parliament is not supreme. The Constitution is supreme.
Right.
And so early next month, the judge, in her wisdom, commented at the end of last week, Wednesday, said, I will give this matter some urgency. And I will make a ruling early in the next month, in June, because I also come from a country, Trinidad, similar to the processes here in Belize, where the Prime Minister can call elections when he pleases. So a ruling is pending from the case we took back for the enforcement of the consent order.
Right.
But the Prime Minister understands, and all of those honorable men understand, that it must meet the constitutional requirements, the scrutiny of the court, and international norms.
Gentlemen, as we wrap up this segment, let's get your final thoughts.
Well, I want to say this. We have a chance to give democracy the opportunity to be applied in its truest sense in Belize. We expect a rejection of this proposal, but the rejection of this proposal means that a new proposal needs to be drafted. A proposal that will give every Belizean equal say in the governance of their country, equal say in the attraction of the resources that are needed for their own development, and equal say in how we move forward as a nation. It is fundamentally important. I certainly would want to wish everybody this morning who is going to the House of Representatives as representative of the people to understand that their role is to represent their people and not to represent the party in this vote. If it does come to a vote, because we know some bills, they give it 3 readings in one House meeting if they want to run it through. This is one of those bills that should be given that same treatment. Run it through this House meeting, let it be over with, because we already know it's not constitutional. Don't waste the people's time. Get us to that point where we can get a new proposal as quickly as possible.
All right.
Mr. Lopez?
Mr. Lopez?
Well, on that note, I would want to ask the Prime Minister for this particular bill to allow a conscience vote to be done. Failing that the Prime Minister does not allow a conscience vote where each representative can say yea or nay and it's counted, then we're calling on a brave parliamentarian. We don't know who that person could be that has the fortitude to stand up and call for a division, which is the same thing. One vote, and we'll see how the 31 of them vote. I know that there are honorable representatives there, and I've called a couple this morning, and as Minister Espat said, there's many of us. So it sounds to me like there's a whole lot that share his same position, and so if that is the case, then we should get what the people want. But on my final note, I call for participatory democracy, which is what Minister Usher has saying we need to move towards. Here's an opportunity for you to participate by going to the House today. If you can't go, then call your area rep, call his office, and let your voice be heard, because we put them there.
Yes.
And they should listen to us, the people, as to how they should be voting in the House.
Yes.
Do the right thing, voters.
All right.
Yes, as I said, we have a House of Representatives that's made up in the analogy of mainly Patlickers, but in Belize City we have all the big dogs. So right now we need to have these people who are Patlickers to come together in a pack, because that's how Patlickers operate, and bark as vociferously as possible.
All
Make
right.
a change.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for stopping by. We appreciate the information that you shared, the explanation that you provided, and of course, having us understand why this process is so important.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you.
We're going to take another quick break, and when we come back, the conversation switches into SEMO, and they'll be talking to us about how we are preparing for the hurricane season set to start on June 1st. Stay with us. We'll be right back.